Hey everyone, 99% of you watching aren't subscribed. Let's change that. Hit that subscribe button, and at 1,000 subscribers, we'll drop special stories just for you.
The message arrived buried in static, out beyond Neptune's pale orbit, where sunlight thinned to a distant suggestion, and the Kuiper debris drifted like forgotten bones. A ray station far-reach listened to the dark. Its vast petals, kilometers-wide antennae spun from carbon lattice and superconductor veins, were tuned to whispers older than humanity itself. Pulsars ticking, quasars raging, the background sigh of creation. It was the kind of place where nothing ever happened, which was precisely why it did. At 3:17 Coordinated Orbital Time, a junior signal analyst named Arun Kale noticed the anomaly. He had been on shift for 6 hours, half awake, sifting through routine cosmic noise while nursing the last warmth from a bulb of recycled coffee. The spike was small, almost shy, a pattern that flickered in and out beneath a storm of charged particle interference. He almost filtered it out. Almost. Instead, he tagged it for deeper analysis and routed it through the station's pattern recognition stack. The AI flagged it as non-random. Arun frowned, leaning closer to the projection tank as threads of light assembled into a waveform above the console. It pulsed, not rhythmically, not like a pulsar. It clustered, prime numbers, 2, 3, 5, 7, 11. A cold ripple slid down Arun's spine. He rerouted the feed to the senior channel and initiated a priority alert. By the time Dr. Elia Vance's terminal chimed on Luna, the signal had repeated 6 times. Elia was asleep when the call came. She surfaced from dreams into the sterile white of her quarters, blinking against the glow of the emergency display. Her implant translated the alert before she fully focused. Non-natural signal candidate. Verification required. She was upright before the second line appeared. Prime sequence confirmed. Source triangulated beyond Neptune. Her pulse steadied, not from calm, but from something sharper. Anticipation, honed over decades. Humanity had chased false dawns before. Microwave leakage mistaken for alien chatter. Gravitational lensing artifacts misread as engineered constructs. She had built her career on debunking hope, but primes were not noise. Within minutes, she was patched into far reach. Arun's face hovered in the corner of her vision, pale and wide-eyed. "Play it," she said. The waveform filled her display. The primes marched again, crisp now, undeniable. After the sequence completed, there was a pause, a mathematically precise silence, followed by something new, hydrogen spectral lines, the universal handshake, the fingerprint of the simplest atom. Elia felt the room shrink around her. "Layer it," she ordered. The AI decomposed the transmission into stack bands. Beneath the primes and hydrogen signature lay a lattice of encoded data. Coordinates resolved first, 3-dimensional vectors relative to known pulsars. She recognized them before the AI confirmed. Sol system, Earth-centric reference. "That's impossible," Arun whispered. Elliot didn't answer. The final layer unfurled slowly, as if reluctant to reveal itself. A sequence of integers, decreasing at fixed intervals. The number held for precisely 100 seconds. Another 100. Arun swallowed audibly. "Is that?" "Yes," Elia said. A countdown. Within an hour, every major observatory in human space was locked onto the signal. Mars Polar Array verified it. The Jovian Magnetosphere Telescope confirmed the same signature. Even the ancient radio dishes preserved in the Atacama Desert, now more museum than instrument, detected the repeating pattern. It wasn't a glitch. It wasn't a hack. It was coming from the outer dark. The United Planetary Council convened an emergency session. Leaders flickered into the chamber from Earth, Mars, the belt and orbital habitats. Faces taut, voices clipped. "Could this be human?" asked Counselor Reed from Mars. "No," Elliot replied. "The source is beyond any operational craft. Approximately 200 astronomical units out. And moving." A murmur rippled through the chamber. "Moving how?" She brought up the trajectory model. A thin red line speared inward toward the inner system. "Fast." "How fast?" The AI finalized its estimate. Elia hesitated before speaking. 0.7 times light speed. Silence swallowed the room. At relativistic velocities, interstellar dust became shrapnel. Navigation required control beyond anything humanity had achieved. No fusion drive, no antimatter reactor in existence could sustain that acceleration without vaporizing its vessel. So we're certain, Reese said slowly, this is artificial. Elia met his gaze through projection. Yes. The countdown ticked to 6. Panic did not erupt immediately. Humanity had matured since its early centuries of fear. The news was released carefully, framed as a verified extraterrestrial signal under analysis. The word countdown was omitted. That lasted 6 hours. A leak from a lunar technician spread across the networks like wildfire. Within minutes, feeds were flooded with speculation. Religious groups declared prophecy fulfilled. Markets convulsed. Streaming platforms filled with amateur decoders claiming hidden meanings. Elia ignored the noise. She focused on the physics. At 0.7 C, the energy of any substantial mass would be catastrophic. But the signal wasn't coming from the object itself. It preceded it by several light minutes. A forward broadcast, as if the source wanted to ensure the message arrived before the object did, which meant intention. And intention meant choice. Could it be a warning? Arun ventured during their 4th consecutive briefing. Or a threat, someone countered. Elia replayed the primes in her mind. Primes were not aggressive. They were neutral, a shared language of mathematics. The hydrogen line was almost polite. The countdown, however, she pulled up the projected arrival window. 11 months. The numbers would reach 0 3 days before the object intersected Earth's orbital path. Not at impact. Before. Her breath caught. Recalculate timing offset, she said. The AI complied. The countdown did not align perfectly with collision. It aligned with something else. An approach threshold. A point where deceleration, if attempted, would be too late. They're giving us a deadline, Elia murmured. For what? Arun asked. She didn't know. 3 weeks later, the object became visible to long-range gravimetric sensors. It was slender, astonishingly so. Hundreds of kilometers long, but only a few wide. Its mass estimates fluctuated wildly as relativistic effects distorted readings. It left no conventional engine signature. Instead, space-time itself seemed compressed along its axis, as though the craft rode a self-generated slope in reality. It's not just moving fast, Elia said during the next council briefing. It's reshaping its path through space-time. Is it maneuvering? Redemanded. No deviation from current vector. And that vector intersects Earth. Yes. The countdown reached 4. This time, humanity did not wait for leaks. The truth was broadcast in full. Cities held vigils beneath holographic projections of the inbound spear. Children in orbital schools asked whether aliens would look like them. Conspiracy networks insisted the object was a hoax engineered to consolidate planetary power. Shipyards received quiet directives. Defense budgets, once debated line by line, were approved in unanimous sweeps. Elia stood alone in the observation ring above Luna, watching Earth turn below her, a swirl of blues and whites, fragile as breath. She had devoted her life to the search for other minds. She had imagined first contact as revelation, as shared knowledge, as the end of loneliness. Not this. The signal chime again in her implant. She closed her eyes. Why warn us? She whispered to the void. No answer came. Only the steady rhythm of diminishing numbers, echoing across the solar system like the ticking of a cosmic clock. Whatever was coming had already crossed the threshold where turning back was impossible. And humanity, for the first time in its history, understood that the universe was not silent. It was counting. The world did not end when the countdown reached 2. It organized. Fear, when stretched across 8 billion minds, did not remain panic for long. It hardened. It crystallized into industry, into equations, into steel. Within 48 hours of confirming the spear's trajectory, the United Planetary Council suspended all interplanetary trade tariffs, rerouted civilian fusion grids, and invoked Continuity Mandate 1. The clause written centuries earlier and never expected to be used. All orbital shipyards were placed under unified command. Mars Helium. 3 exports tripled overnight. The Belt's mining syndicates were offered something they had never been given before: full amnesty for past violations in exchange for immediate resource compliance. They agreed within minutes. Humanity had less than 11 months. Dr. Elia Vance stood inside Dock 7's skeletal frame as construction drones stitched together the spine of the first dreadnought. She felt small beneath it. The ship's skeleton stretched nearly 8 kilometers end to end, a dark lattice of trusswork designed to endure accelerations that would pulp an unprotected human body into slurry. Along its axis ran the primary weapon, a magnetically suspended antimatter containment tube, thick as a skyscraper and sheathed in ablative armor. The antimatter itself will be manufactured near Mercury, where solar harvest arrays fed energy into particle traps the size of continents. Decades of cautious accumulation, grams at a time, were now being siphoned into weapons cores measured in kilograms. Kilograms. It was more antimatter than humanity had ever stored in one place. "We are crossing thresholds we swore we never would," Elia murmured. Admiral Soren Kale, newly appointed commander of the Solar Defense Coalition, stood beside her. His uniform still bore the insignia of the old Earth Navy, though that Navy no longer existed as an independent force. "We swore we'd never need to," he replied. The skeleton shuddered as a prefabricated hull segment locked into place. The hull was matte black, layered with metamaterials designed to diffuse high-energy impacts. Embedded within were rail systems for kinetic payloads, tungsten rods, each the mass of a subway train, engineered to accelerate to a measurable fraction of light speed. The ship had a name already: Valiant Horizon. Elliot disliked it. It sounded hopeful. Hope felt reckless. Across the solar system, industry transformed. The lunar mining ring, once devoted to rare earth extraction, was reconfigured into a mass driver network. Instead of launching cargo toward orbit, it hurled dense slugs toward staging platforms where they were forged into munitions. On Mars, terraforming efforts halted. Atmospheric processors were cannibalized for reactor shielding. The great mirror arrays that once warmed the Martian poles were repositioned to power orbital fabrication. Even the Jovian habitats contributed. Their fusion research stations, experimental, theoretical, were stripped down and rebuilt into propulsion testbeds. Engineers who had spent lifetimes arguing about efficiency now argued about yield. Project Aegis was no longer theoretical. It was inevitability. Elia's team worked around exhaustion. The Spear's telemetry updated hourly. Its velocity remained constant, 0.7 c, with minor fluctuations that suggested internal course correction. The forward broadcast continued without interruption. The number pulsed every 100 seconds, as steady as a heartbeat. She studied the object's structure in obsessive detail. High-resolution interferometry revealed faint segmentation along its length, bands that shimmered as if composed of layered fields rather than solid matter. "It's not a simple projectile," Arun said during one of their briefings. He looked older now. They all did. "It's modular." "Meaning?" Admiral Kale asked. "It can change configuration mid-flight." Kale's jaw tightened. "So it's not just a spear." "No," Elliot said quietly. "It's a system." That word lingered in the air. System implied design. Design implied builders. And builders implied intention. The first antimatter core was installed 90 days after Project Aegis activation. Elliot watched through reinforced glass as containment fields flared to life around the capsule, a cylinder no larger than a cargo shuttle, yet capable of releasing energy equivalent to thousands of fusion bombs. If the containment failed, Dock 7 would cease to exist. So would half of Luna's orbital infrastructure. The field stabilized. A collective breath released across the command deck. Kale turned to Elia. "If we detonate one of these against the spear, will it be enough?" She considered the simulations. None were reassuring. "At that velocity," she said, "the spear's kinetic energy alone is planetary. Antimatter might fracture it. It won't erase the mass." "We don't need to erase it," Kale said. We need to disrupt its integrity, change its vector. Her eyes flicked to the projected trajectory, a thin red line piercing Earth's orbit. Vector, it was the only variable that mattered. Public morale oscillated wildly. There were protests, of course, voices insisting humanity should attempt communication rather than militarization. Others argued the opposite, that the spear was proof of hostile intent, and that Earth should prepare evacuation arcs toward outer colonies. Elia attended a live broadcast forum reluctantly. She faced a wall of cameras, the image of the inbound spear rotating behind her. "Dr. Vance," the moderator asked, "do you believe this is a weapon?" She paused. "I believe it is not an accident." "Is that the same thing?" No. The distinction frustrated viewers. They wanted certainty. Enemy or savior, doom or deliverance. Elia had none to offer. What she had were numbers, and the numbers were merciless. By month 4, the fleet had taken shape. 27 dreadnoughts, 84 escort cruisers, hundreds of autonomous drone carriers. They called it Grave Fire. The name originated from a belt worker's comment on a public forum. "If the universe lights our grave, we'll light it back." It stuck. Each dreadnought bore the same inscription along its spine. "We were warned." The phrase was debated intensely before approval. Some argued it sounded accusatory, as if blaming the unknown sender for what was coming. But that was the point. The warning had changed everything. Humanity would not be caught unprepared. Elia toured Valiant Horizon before its final systems integration. Inside, the corridors were narrow and utilitarian. No windows, no ornamentation. Crew quarters were compact modules designed for acceleration tolerance. The central command chamber was spherical, layered with holographic interfaces. At its heart floated the firing lattice, control pathways of the antimatter lance. Space did not roar when the fleet opened fire. It bloomed. At 3 million kilometers from the inbound spear, Admiral Kale gave the order. No countdown, no rhetoric. Just a single word transmitted across encrypted channels. Burn. 27 dreadnoughts aligned along pre-calculated vectors. Their spines rotated, antimatter lances sliding into firing position like the unsheathing of blades. Around them, drone swarms expanded into layer formations, kinetic interceptors in the vanguard, singularity carriers held in reserve. On Luna, Elia Vance watched through a composite feed stitched from 100 sensor arrays. The spear dominated the projection. 600 kilometers of impossible precision, its surface warping light, so that it seemed both present and absent, a needle threaded through space-time. Range. Kale's voice echoed across the channel. 2.9 million kilometers, Tactical replied. Relative velocity unchanged. Weight distortion stable. The spear did not alter course. It did not acknowledge the fleet. Fire. The first antimatter lance ignited. A column of contained annihilation screamed across the void, not with sound, but with violence. When it struck the spear's forward quarter, space itself seemed to tear. Gamma radiation flared. Sensors whitened out. For a fraction of a second, the spear vanished behind a glare brighter than a newborn star. Then the light receded. A gouge marred the spear's surface, kilometers deep, incandescent. But it was not enough. Impact confirmed, Tactical reported. Mass loss negligible. Second volley, Kale ordered. Rail cannons followed. Tungsten rods accelerated down magnetic spines at relativistic fractions, their kinetic energy rivaling small asteroids. They struck in synchronized waves, punching through the spear's outer layers. Debris vaporized instantly under friction and radiation. For a moment, just a moment, the spear's wake flickered. Then its surface moved. Not shattered, moved. The material flowed, redistributing mass along its length. The gouges sealed with chilling efficiency, layers folding over exposed sections like living tissue knitting closed. Elia felt her breath leave her lungs. "It's adaptive," she whispered. As if in answer, the spear responded. Segments along its midsection detached, sleek, blade-like spines peeling away with mechanical grace. They did not tumble. They accelerated, multiple objects separating. Tactical shouted, 20? No, 40 distinct vectors. Intercept. Kale snapped. Drone swarm surged forward. Interceptors colliding with the detached spines in controlled detonations. Explosions peppered the darkness. Several spines shattered under kinetic assault. Others did not. One pierced a drone carrier, slicing through its reactor column. The ship blossomed into plasma, fragments spinning silently into the void. Another darted toward Resolute Dawn, impacting along its port rail assembly. The dreadnought's shields flared uselessly, designed for radiation, not hypervelocity penetration. The spine bored through armor, through crew decks, and exited the opposite hull in a spray of incandescent debris. Damage report. Kale demanded. Catastrophic structural failure. Came the strained reply. Reactor containment compromised. Resolute Dawn flared briefly, then broke apart. Tuev's drifting, glowing. Elia's hand tightened against the console edge. The spear was not retaliating randomly. Its countermeasures were surgical. They're targeting propulsion and reactors, she said into the channel. They're not trying to wipe us out instantly. They're neutralizing interference. Kale absorbed that. Meaning we're an obstacle. The word carried weight. Not enemy. Obstacle. The fleet adjusted. Cruisers repositioned to shield damaged dreadnoughts. Drone carriers deployed singularity warheads. Micro-black holes stabilized within electromagnetic cages. When released, they lived for seconds before evaporating in violent hawking bursts. 3 were launched simultaneously at the spear's forward axis. The effect was catastrophic. Space-time buckled. The spear's wake distorted wildly as the micro-singularities bit into its structure, tearing away entire sections. A fragment the size of a city sheared off and disintegrated under tidal forces. For the first time, the spear's velocity fluctuated measurably. Cheers erupted across fleet channels, then stopped. The spear compensated. Energy surged along its length, bands igniting with cold blue radiance. The detached spines reoriented, no longer targeting individual ships. Instead, they formed a loose lattice ahead of the spear's nose, a shield. The next antimatter volley struck that lattice and diffused across it. Energy redistributed along interconnected nodes. The spear's main body remained intact. Its learning, a rune breathed over the Luna Link. Elia's mind raced. No pre-programmed defense should adapt this fluidly to novel weapons. The spear had not encountered antimatter lances before. It had not evolved against singularity bursts, yet it adjusted within seconds. Cognitive architecture embedded in structure, she murmured. Distributed intelligence. Are you saying it's thinking? Kale asked. I'm saying it's solving. Casualties mounted. Valiant Horizon took a glancing hit from a spine that sliced through its dorsal communications array. Captain Rao maintained formation, rerouting command pathways manually as sparks rained through her bridge. Keep firing, she ordered her crew. Adjust aim 2 degrees starboard. Focus on mass displacement. They were no longer trying to destroy it. They were trying to push it. Elia had revised the objective mid-battle. Destruction simulations had fallen below 1% probability. But vector alteration, microscopic nudges compounded over millions of kilometers, remained possible. If we can induce asymmetrical damage along its flank, she had explained, we might force course correction. It was a desperate calculus. Physics as persuasion. Rail cannons shifted aim. Instead of targeting the spear's tip, they hammered its port side in rhythmic barges. Antimatter lances detonated not directly against the hull but slightly offset, creating uneven space-time distortions. The spear responded by redistributing mass again, but each adaptation required internal energy that bled from its wake. Velocity dipped by 0.002%. Tiny, but real. Vector deviation detected. Tactical confirmed. Kale's eyes hardened. Press it. Another dreadnought fell. Indomitable Reach was struck by 3 spines simultaneously. One penetrated its antimatter containment field. For a fraction of a second, alarms howled across fleet channels. Then the ship ceased to exist. The annihilation flash blinded sensors across thousands of kilometers. When vision returned, there was only expanding debris and a radiation scar that would linger for decades. Silence followed. Not shock. Calculation. How many remain? Kale asked quietly. 19 dreadnoughts. 71 escorts. The spear continued forward, unwavering. The countdown signal, still broadcasting ahead of it, pulsed in the background of every tactical display. Over and over. The number felt accusatory now. Elia zoomed out the projection, overlaying the spear's projected path with updated deviation data. Her heart skipped. "Admiral," she said, voice tight, "I need full spectrum analysis on its trajectory relative to Sol." A pause. Then data streamed in. She recalculated manually, ignoring the AI's first pass. The spear's original line intersected Earth's orbital plane precisely, but its long-term path. She magnified the solar model. The red line did not end at Earth. It extended inward through the sun's outer corona, into its core. Cold realization settled over her like frost. "Admiral," she said again, louder now, "the primary target isn't Earth." Kale didn't respond immediately. He was watching another cruiser disintegrate under spine assault. "Elia," he said through clenched teeth, "this is not the moment for her. It's the sun." Silence cut through the chaos. "What?" The Earth coordinate was a reference point. The spear's true intercept is Sol. At this velocity, an impact would destabilize stellar equilibrium, massive ejection, system-wide sterilization. Tactical ran the numbers in parallel. Confirmation came seconds later. Projected solar core interaction probability, 87%. Kale stared at the data, jaw slack. "So Earth was never the bullseye," he said. "No," Ellie replied. "It was the clock face." Understanding rippled across command channels. The warning had not been a threat. It had been a deadline before stellar execution. Another spine tore through Courage of Mars, snapping it in two. Kale's expression hardened. "All ships," he transmitted, voice steady now with something colder than fear. Objective revised. "We are not defending Earth." He paused only a fraction of a second. "We are defending the sun." The fleet shifted formation, no longer intercepting head-on. They angled along the spear's flank, concentrating fire to induce maximum lateral deviation. Rail cannons hammered in synchronized cadence. Surviving singularity warheads were deployed along one side only, ripping uneven cavities into the spear's mass. Velocity dipped again, 0.01%, then 0.02. Each detonation shaved momentum. Each lost ship became a lever against cosmic inertia. The spear's wake destabilized, shimmering erratically. Detached spines faltered in coordination, some colliding with one another as structural logic strained under constant adaptation. "It's compensating," Arun reported, "but at increasing energy costs." "Good," Kale muttered. Valiant Horizon was crippled next. A spine penetrated its aft engines, shredding containment coils. Captain Rao remained at her station as gravity fluctuated violently around her. "Admiral," she said over open channel, "we've lost primary thrust." "Understood," Kale replied. Rao looked at the tactical map. At the narrow window remaining before the spear crossed a threshold where even massive deviation would be insufficient. She did not hesitate. "Helm," she ordered calmly. "Set collision course." Elia's breath caught. "Captain, no." Rao's image flickered onto the lunar feed. Smoke drifted behind her. Sparks cascaded from ruptured panels. "If physics responds," Rao said softly, "let's get something to answer." Valiant Horizon ignited its remaining thrusters and angled directly into the spear's damaged flank. At 0.7 c relative velocity, the impact was incomprehensible. The dreadnought ceased to exist, but the spear's side erupted, mass shearing away in a plume of vaporized alloy and fractured fields. Vector deviation spiked, 0.05%, then 0.08. Enough. New trajectory plotted, Tactical announced, disbelief threading the words. Revised solar intercept shifting outward. Corona contact likely. Core penetration probability decreasing. Across the fleet, a grim understanding settled. They could not destroy it, but they could wound it. and wounds applied with relentless asymmetry could bend fate. The countdown pulsed again. For the first time, Elia understood. 0 was not impact. 0 was the moment the spear crossed the point of no return, and humanity still had time to push. 0 arrived without ceremony. The number on every screen, on Luna, on Mars, in the drifting habitats of Belt, shifted from 1 to 0 and held. No explosion followed. No divine voice. No sudden change in the spear's velocity. It simply continued forward. But every physicist in the solar system understood what had just happened. The spear had crossed a threshold where, if left unchallenged, its collision with Sol would be inevitable, and humanity was still in its path. The fleet was dying by degrees. 12 dreadnoughts remained. 42 escorts. Drone reserves below 20%. Admiral Kale stood in the dim command sphere of the flagship Greyfire Actual, watching icons wink out one by one. The tactical projection showed the spear no longer centered, its trajectory line now grazing the sun's outer envelope rather than piercing toward its core. It wasn't enough. A coronal impact at 0.7 C would unleash a flare beyond anything recorded in human history. Power grids would collapse. Atmospheric chemistry would destabilize. Orbital infrastructure would be flayed by radiation. Earth would survive. Barely. Elia, Kale said, voice tight with strain. How much farther do we need to push? On Luna, Elia's calculations layered across 3 holographic planes. Solar models ran in accelerated time, plasma convection simulations blooming and collapsing in violent color. Another 0.12 degrees, she replied. We need to shift impact latitude along the corona. If we can force contact at a shallower angle, energy dispersal increases exponentially. And if we fail? She didn't answer immediately. If we fail, she said finally, the flare will strip half our satellites and ignite every unshielded grid on Earth. Kale nodded once. All ships, he transmitted across the fleet. New objective, lateral pressure along port flank. Concentrate fire. Prepare for terminal maneuvers. No one asked what that meant. The spear had begun to change. The continuous broadcast, the primes, the hydrogen line, the countdown had ceased at 0. In its place came something else. A modulation. Faint. Buried beneath the main carrier wave. A rune isolated from Luna and fed it into decryption stacks. It's layered, he muttered. Not reactive. Pre-encoded. Elia glanced at the data, but forced herself back to the battle. Interpretation could wait. Survival could not. The fleet executed the most dangerous maneuver in its short, brutal history. Instead of attacking from distributed vectors, the remaining dreadnoughts formed a crescent along the spear's port side. Escorts interlocked fields to provide minimal shielding. Drone carriers emptied their remaining payloads in staggered detonations, microsingularities ripping uneven cavities along the spear's already damaged flank. Antimatter lances fired not at the hull, but just off its surface, detonating in tight proximity to create asymmetric space-time distortion. Each blast shoved, not shattered. Rail cannons hammered in relentless cadence. The spear surface flowed in response, but slower now. Adaptation lag increased. Energy emissions along its length flickered erratically. It's reaching internal limits, a rune reported. Power redistribution inefficient. How inefficient? Kale demanded. Unknown, but its wake stability is degrading. That was new. The spear's compressed space-time envelope. Its method of sustaining relativistic travel wavered visibly. Gravitational readings fluctuated. Keep pushing. Kale barked. Another escort vanished under spine assault. 2 more dreadnoughts suffered catastrophic hull breaches. Crews vented into vacuum in flashes of white frost. No one broke formation. On Luna, Elia's solar models updated. Impact latitude shifted. 0.04 degrees. 0.07. Not enough. She ran probability trees at machine speed. If the spear struck too steeply, the resulting solar flare would direct plasma outward along magnetic field lines, toward the inner planets, toward Earth. If they could flatten the angle, Elia, a rune said suddenly, you need to see this. He overlaid the decoded modulation onto a galactic map. Dots appeared, dozens of them, each marked with the same symbol that had accompanied Sol's coordinates in the original transmission. Crossed out, extinguished stars. Her blood ran cold. The warning had not come from the spear. It had come from someone who had seen this before. "Admiral," she said, voice barely steady. "The transmission includes a star map, systems targeted by similar objects." Cale absorbed that in silence. "How many?" he asked. "Dozens confirmed. Possibly more." "Survivors?" "Unknown." A pause. "Then we are not the first," he said quietly. "No," Elia replied. "We're just the next." The spear detached more spines, fewer this time, slower. They struck the fleet's crescent formation with surgical precision, targeting antimatter containment housings and engine cores. One spine penetrated Gravefire actual starboard shielding, tearing through 3 decks before embedding itself in a bulkhead near the command sphere. Atmosphere vented in a violent rush. Emergency fields snapped into place milliseconds before decompression reached the bridge. Cale didn't flinch. "Status?" "Structural integrity holding." Tactical replied. "Containment stable. For now." Outside, 2 dreadnoughts executed terminal maneuvers without orders. Shield of Ganymede angled sharply, ramming into a weakened section of the spear's flank. Its antimatter core detonated on impact, not as a control lance, but as a catastrophic release. The explosion tore a canyon through the spear's midsection. Vector deviation spiked. 0.11 degrees. "Close." "Not enough." "Another push," Elia whispered. As if hearing her, Captain Amani Rao's successor aboard the crippled Valiant Horizon 2 transmitted a final message. For Sol. The dreadnought ignited its reserves and accelerated into the spear's port side at an oblique angle calculated to maximize lateral impulse. Impact. The spear's wake convulsed. Space-time rippled outward in violent waves, gravitational readings spiking off scale. The spear's nose tilted, minutely at first, then measurably. Deviation at 0.13 degrees. Tactical shouted. Projected impact latitude shifting to upper corona. Core penetration probability under 5%. Elia exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Solar simulations recalculated. The flare would still be monstrous, but survivable. The fleet was reduced to debris and drifting hulks. 5 dreadnoughts remained operational. The spear, scarred and partially fragmented, no longer resembled a perfect needle. Its once smooth geometry was jagged, asymmetrical, but it did not stop. Nothing could stop that mass at that speed. All humanity could do was decide where it would land. "Admiral," Elia said softly, "we've done all we can. Further engagement risks reducing deviation." Cale watched the projection for a long moment. "Signal remaining ships," he said. "Break off." There were no cheers, no triumph. The surviving vessels peeled away, engines sputtering, hulls blackened and fractured. Behind them, the spear continued toward the sun. 72 hours later, it struck. From Earth, the impact was invisible at first, a brief brightening along the sun's limb. Then the corona flared. Solar plasma erupted outward in a titanic arc, a continent-sized wave of incandescent matter. Magnetic field lines twisted violently, snapping and reconnecting in storms of charged particles. Satellites died in droves. Communication arrays overloaded. Power grids across Earth and Mars collapsed under geomagnetic assault. For 3 days, the sky burned. Auroras bled to the equator. Curtains of green and violet fire rippling above cities plunged into darkness. Transformers exploded. Aircraft were grounded. Millions perished in cascading infrastructure failures. But the sun endured. Its core remained stable. Fusion continued. So lived, and so did humanity. In the months that followed, reconstruction became the new war. Orbital debris fields were cleared. Power grids rebuilt with hardened shielding. The surviving fleet vessels were towed home like relics from a mythic battle. Elia spent those months decoding the remainder of the transmission. The star map was only the first layer. Beneath it lay data fragments, spectral analyses of extinguished suns, gravitational signatures of prior impacts, and something else. A signature, not biological, not linguistic, a pattern in the modulation, a consistent anomaly across all recorded strikes. They're not random, Arun said as they studied the overlay. The targeted stars share characteristics. Elia zoomed out. All were yellow dwarfs, all within a narrow metallicity range, all with confirmed planetary systems in the habitable zone. Her throat tightened. It's not stellar warfare, she whispered. It's selective. A culling. Someone was sterilizing systems capable of sustaining complex life, and someone else had tried to warn them. Why us? Arun asked. Elia looked at Sol's SCAR data profile. Because we were listening. The forward broadcast had been narrow beam, aimed precisely at Earth's position in space. Whoever sent it knew where humanity was, knew they had developed the capacity to detect and decode. It had not been a general alarm. It had been a gift. The final decoded fragment emerged nearly a year after the battle. It was simple, a repetition of the hydrogen line, followed by a new coordinate set, not of a threatened system, but of origin, a distant region near the Perseus arm, a faint star cluster on the galactic fringe. No countdown accompanied it. No threat, just location. Elia stood once more in Luna's observation ring, watching the sun, steady, radiant, scarred only in data. Behind her, shipyard were active again, but not with dreadnought hulls. This time, they assembled long-range vessels, generation ships, research craft, exploration cruisers equipped not with antimatter lances, but with archives, seeds, and ambassadors. Humanity had launched its deadliest fleet because it had been warned. Now it would launch something else, not out of desperation, but out of obligation. Somewhere in the dark, a civilization had seen stars die and chosen to save strangers. Soul still burned because of that choice. Elia rested her hand against the glass as sunlight spilled across her face. "We heard you," she whispered to the distant cluster. And for the first time since the signal arrived, the universe felt not hostile, but connected.